Hi, guys. All right, I am very excited to bring up our panelists for today's Procedurals panel, who are not going to wait for me to introduce them. They're just going to walk right up. No, it's fine. Welcome. We're setting the stage early. Get up here. David Hudgins, the showrunner of FBI Most Wanted. Followed by, you're good. Followed by Torrey DeVitto, Daniel Kyri, Octavio Pisano, and Travina Springer. I like that everyone chose not to use the steps at the front of the stage. We are really
it looks cooler to just jump up here down there.
So much cooler. I want to start because we had a panel this morning with the presidents of some of the studios who we talked about what they were looking for when they're looking for new shows, and they talked about the return of people asking for procedurals, which I found very interesting as someone who spends 12 hours a week watching procedurals. I was very happy to hear that. But David, I want to start with you because as the showrunner of one, have you felt that renewed interest in the procedural universe?
I have. And a lot of it is, network television, the whole discussion about is network television dead, et cetera. I think procedurals just naturally do well on network television. And that's a function of, I don't know what. But certainly on the studio and executive side, they're interested in developing them because they do work well. And for me, it's always been that you can see a self-contained story in an hour, which is really 42 minutes, and it's very satisfying for the audience, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to talk to you guys, the actors, a little about kind of what drew you to the procedural world. And Travina, I want to start with you with the Irrational, because it is a little bit different, and you're not playing a first responder. You're playing a normal person who is part of this world. And I'm curious for you, what attracted you to that? And were you a procedural fan before that?
I don't even know if I realized that our show was a procedural when I auditioned for it, based on how it was written. But I think I was drawn to the character. She was very fun, and I didn't get that much. I couldn't tell that much about her with what I was given for the pilot, but she was a fun spirit. She's very different than her brother, who's very rational, and I make what they say a series of irrational decisions, maybe in comparison. So I just took liberty to make really fun choices for her, and I was like, I'm going to make Kylie funny, and that's what I chose to do when I read for it, and I think the ability to do that in a world like procedurals are usually very serious, and I like that our show has a little bit of quirk to it, and I lean into it. Everything from the pink hair to the color. I'm the quirky character in our world. So.
She's spicy. I feel like that's which is nice. Yeah, for sure. Octavio, what about you? Were you a SVU fan when you came on?
I wasn't. I am now. I started watching the show as homework. And then now I got hooked. And I can't really understand why. It's just kind of like one of those things where you just turn on the TV and whatever episode you find, you can just drop in. Like you said, it's a self-contained story. So you don't have to be following a whole storyline to just tune in.
What was it about that character that made you want to be part of it?
Well, I do feel like there's a healing component to the show, because of the subject matter that we deal with. There's a lot of people that watch it, and there's alchemy that happens because it's based on trauma. And I've always been attracted to the healing part of television and entertainment in the arts.
Yeah. All right, Daniel, let's talk about Chicago Fire. One of my all-time favorites. What drew you to this, and how was that for you to take on a firefighter role?
Well, okay, so
get ready, everybody.
Okay, so the tea is this, y'all. I mean, look, when I was my character, I mean, you know this story, I'm sure, but
Please.
my character was, a kind of 2-episode guy when I auditioned, and there wasn't a ton of information about him. It was more about the sort of mentorship that happens between my character and Mouch, for those of you who watch the show. And an opportunity for him to just be in that kind of leadership role. And so, my job, I was a co-star, was to kind of come in and, be that guy for the other guy. And so I can look you in the eyes and be honest with this answer. What drew me to the part was the chance to work and make a little money.
We love the honesty.
And what I care about. But, of course, since then, because I've had the opportunity to grow into the character and to really work my craft in this way and in this role, there are other elements of being a part of a show like this that have come to light that I really, really do, love and have fallen in love with. But initially, I said I have bills to pay. So that's how that happened.
This is the only industry where we ask people why they took a job, and it's not like, well, the paycheck is the first answer.
Okay, I love what I do, but it's nice to get paid for it too.
Yeah, 100%. We love the honesty. All right, Torrey. So when you joined Chicago Med, I mean, it was very early on in the franchise. So I'm curious for you, like, did you know a ton about Natalie when you joined, or how did you kind of venture that?
I knew enough about her to know that I completely loved her. I feel like I came from doing a lot of teen shows, as you know.
I do know.
And I was so ready to do what I felt like was adult TV or film. And so when this landed in my lap, I loved it. And only a few times in my career have I ever really gotten that feeling where I was like, nobody can do this but me. I need to do her. I need to play her. And I felt that way because I had done hospice work for about 8 years, and she had such compassion to also being a doctor. And I felt like she was such a real person that I was like, oh my God, I need this. I need this. And so I walked in and I just felt like she was mine and I was hers.
I love that so much. I want to ask a little about coming into a universe that's already been formed, because a few of you have done that. I mean, obviously, the first 4 of you are technically all in the same universe for the shows that you were on, which is an interesting thing to think about. But David, you came into Most Wanted a little bit later. So what was that like, walking into a show that already had a fan base, already had these developed characters, and was there a challenge there?
It was a very interesting thing. It was the second time I'd done it. So I was asked to take over running of the show in year 2. I took the job. I was in Tennessee on a screen porch when I said yes, and 2 weeks later the country shut down. Basically, the pandemic began. So we did everything on Zoom from the beginning. We're still doing it on Zoom, just by nature of the show. So the challenge, first of all, taking over was we were in the middle of a pandemic. But when they brought me into the show, look, if you had asked me 10 years ago that would I be working on a procedural, I would have probably laughed because my background is in family dramas. But they wanted more character on the show, and that was the charge that I got, was let's go home with these people, let's find out more about their lives. That was attractive to me, and I wanted to try a procedural. I had never done one before. Honestly, I was terrible at it at the beginning. I probably should have gotten fired for the first episode I turned in. It sucked, and we had to do reshoots. But I learned how to do it very quickly, and we have a great cast. The show shoots in New York. Writers are in LA. A lot of it is through Zoom, and the way you break a procedural is completely different from the way you do a family drama. So it was learning a new skill, and that was a challenge. But fortunately, once you sort of figure it out, it's great. Yeah, and I mean, I think we're all worried about Dick Wolf having enough television shows on the air, but I think this it's the kind of show that can just keep going because it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a long rambling answer. I'm not even sure it was to your question.
It was. No,
Okay.
It was great. It was great. Daniel, I wanted to ask you something similar though, coming into Fire with the family already built and the fan base built. Was that challenging at all for you to break in? Obviously, you started as a 2-episode arc, and they obviously loved you because you were still there. But I feel like the character has also grown so much from when he joined. So what was it like for you stepping into this kind of already developed family?
You know, what's really beautiful about the way even that the shows are run is as an actor that came in later, this train's already running. You know what I mean? And so really your only job is to get on that sucker and ride it out and add your special sauce to whatever, whatever elements are present. And so for me, coming in, I don't mind telling you, I had only done one other television job at that point, and it actually it was on Chicago Med. We didn't have anything together, but
I was like, oh my god, I don't remember that.
and that was like that was a co-star, like a quick little thing. And then so Chicago Fire is my second job after that. And for me, just as a young actor coming in, I was pretty young at the time, I just wanted to do a good job, as so many of us do. And I had, watched a couple episodes and seen the this chemistry that these actors have, which is what's interesting about that is like stepping on set, these guys, I'll never forget it. My first van ride was like, Taylor Kinney, it was Eamon Walker, it was Miranda Mayo, it was Joe Manoso, and they're like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm Daniel Kyri. I'm like the guy who locks up on the stairwell." And they're like, "Oh, you have the scene with Christian." And I'm like, "Who is Christian?" And so they're already kind of inducting, like hazing me a little bit, being like, "Oh yeah, he's the greatest actor of our generation." They said that so later on, by the time I'm so like, okay, you have got to nail this. And I get in there and there's like 4 cameras, there's like smoke, there's like these lights simulating fire, something is on fire over there. And like people are like truly slamming into me as they're going up the stairs, like they're firefighters like doing the thing. I'm like, okay, right, I need to be more, so all these things are going through my head. So it really wasn't like I'm really gonna add to this thing. It was just, I need to do the best job that I can. I need to walk away from this feeling like I gave everything that I could to the character's truth in that moment. And I think that I did, thankfully. And I had such generous scene partners in that. And everyone really took care of me, even though I walked away with bruises after that first day.
Emotional or physical?
And I will answer that by saying yes. No, I mean, it was incredible to be a part of. And I think the next time I had my next episode or my next scene on the show, I was just able to sort of follow the example that these actors who had been doing this thing for a while set for me. Mm-hmm. And that was the most wonderful sort of gift that I got in my earlier episodes. Yeah. So yeah, like that.
Octavio, you stepped into a show that has been on for 45 years, and I say that with the most love. But was that at all intimidating to step into that?
No, I mean, no, I got on the show after or during the pandemic, so I was out of work for like 2 years, and it happened so quickly. The biggest thing that I kept hearing when I came on is like, this is the 25th season. This is the longest TV show running in history. Don't mess it up, basically. And you talk about being a train. This is a fast machine. It's just like going with or without you, and you're just trying to catch on. I think the first season was just kind of like a blur. I don't even know how I was saying the lines and everything. But again, Mariska, Eyes, everyone was just so generous, and they taught me the ropes. So I was blessed in that way.
Yeah, definitely. I want to talk a little about the authenticity and kind of the accuracy of doing some of these, because when you're playing, especially when you're playing first responders, there is such an importance around that and making sure things are done in the correct way, and people aren't at home being like, that's not realistic. And especially in the Dick Wolf world, I think he does a really great job making sure all of his shows are covering the bases in that way. Can any of you talk to that a little bit, whether it's like learning? I mean, for Torrey, I don't know some of the monologues that you've had to give, that the people on Chicago Med have had to give, those kind of things. I mean, just the wording or the movement. Can you talk a little about that process and learning that?
Yeah, I would love to just say that when I was 17, I did a play called Eleemosynary by Lee Blessing, and I played a spelling bee champion. And my mom loved going around to everyone. Well, I think she does this role so well because she played a spelling bee champion, so she can say all the medical terms. I'm like, stop, just stop.
So that's the secret.
Is to be the secret. No, it was probably the most intimidating role I've ever walked into, because you are playing these real people who are real heroes, and the last thing you want to do is mess it up. And I feel like me and Nick Gelfis, like, we can't even watch the first season because we feel like we're doctors. We have to be doctors. And it's like, no, these people are actually human too, you know? I'm like, oh my God, I'm surprised I didn't get fired after the first episode. It was so, but yeah, it's a lot of learning, and you want to be able, I mean, these people are just spitting out this jargon, and then they're like, what do you want for lunch? You know, it's just what they do. And so you have to have that smoothness with it. And I'd say it took all of us about a season to really sink in, especially with the medical terms and stuff. Yeah. Because you're using all the tools and the terms at the same time. I do wish, because Dick Wolf never did a blooper reel on our show, and that would have been so good.
It's got to be there somewhere, right? We got to have that somewhere.
I definitely have it somewhere.
Bring it out.
David, for you, how much are you involved in that behind the scenes, making sure things, like, are there people calling the shots?
Absolutely. So we have two consultants on our show. One is an former FBI agent who is in charge of the fugitive task force in California. And he works with us in the writers room. He's actually the guy who caught Whitey Bulger. And we did an episode based on that. So Scott is constantly, as we're writing the show, saying, here's what he always says. I know you're not making a documentary, but, and he'll give us the parameters. He'll give us the guardrails. So in the creation of the stories, that helps. And then we have a similar consultant on set when we're shooting that works with the actors. Here's how they all know how to hold a gun by now, but it's, this is what we would do in this situation. So we do try to keep it authentic. And I, constantly got my eye on that. We want it to be authentic. But we also want to push the envelope and tell stories. And, a lot of television is what if, the fantasy of that. So we try to break out of that world when we can. And before I let go, I just want to say something that I'm realizing before I stop talking. I'm not going to let go. Sitting on this stage right now, it strikes me, especially during the pandemic, but even now, the casting process changed. It used to be these guys would walk into a room and you would get to meet them and see them and hear them and listen to them and feel their energy, just like I'm doing right now. What happens now is they submit on tape. And so you get a tape, which is basically a video that they make of them doing the scene. Those get called through or whatever. By the time it gets to me, they'll say, here's 2 choices for this part. And, sometimes 3,
So
but typically,
Literally, we're all like,
Wait a minute.
My tape was a waste of time.
2 choices?
well, there's a director of the episode who does that winnow too. So there's a whole process. But what I'm saying is, I'm realizing how important, like, I can totally understand why they kept you on that show. I mean, you're funny, you're magnetic, just sitting here next to you. It's like, I mean, but I'm saying that in these kinds, and it's different from a family drama where you cast we cast the Taylors in Friday Night Lights and they were there for the whole show. On a procedural, you're constantly bringing in new people. And when you have somebody come in that pops, you immediately go back to the writer's room and say, oh my God, have you seen the dailies? Jen Landon is so great. We need to keep Jen Landon on the show. What can we do to get Jen Landon? She's on Yellowstone. Fuck Yellowstone. We want her. So, that's all I wanted to say, is that I'm really realized I wish we could go back to in-room auditions.
Yeah.
Me too.
Me too. Me 3. Yeah.
Travina, I wanted to ask you about your casting process, because I do think you joined a show a bit later than them. I mean, I think Octavio, you also joined at around the same time, but for being in the Irrational, when it started, it was so.
No, I was in it from the beginning.
No, I mean when it started, it's more recent. I'm saying because a lot of these shows
they're like, yeah, they drove like this is the train running. They just got to join it. You had like source material to study.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Okay.
You had a brand new show. You're coming in, and I'm curious for you what your audition process was like.
So I got the sides and I put myself on tape, and Jesse L. Martin is our lead, and yes, woo, it's amazing. And so he was already attached to the show. It was his show, and but this was like in the time period I hadn't worked in maybe a year, I think, and you're just putting the tapes out when you're just like, okay, this goes into the ether. Does anybody see the tapes? Is anybody watching this? Apparently only 2 people make it to the final round. But I did a tape, and I literally just did it on a laptop with a friend, and I just did a few takes. I messed up one line, and I liked the take, but I messed up the line, and I didn't like how I did. So I kept trying to fix it, and I was like, you know what? Forget it. F it. Submit the one with the mess up. And I got a call back, and we did our producer session, and they were like, the pink hair works for the character, which is my hair. And they used that tape for my test, and that was the process. But it was nice to be in a room, even though it was virtual, with humans so they could see who I am and my essence. And I think even in that room, I messed up a line, with the casting director, and I just joked about it and corrected. And it was a very fun process, but I'm going to tell you this, very similarly, when I think when I did the test, I was like, oh, I got Kylie. It was, this is my role.
Yeah.
And that doesn't usually happen. You read a thing, you'd be like, oh, I bombed that. And I knew I messed up, but it is nice when you do get material and you feel very connected to it and like, oh, I can do this. This is meant to be. And I'm not arrogant about that because, honey, okay, this industry is humbling to the spirit.
Yeah.
But that was the process for me. I felt really natural and good, and everybody was really wonderful.
I want to talk about the love for procedurals in general and the passion around that. I'm curious if any of you have a theory as to, I know, David, you kind of shared yours, but what it is about a procedural, whether it's a case of the week, whether it's a medical drama or firefighters or cops, what it is that people cannot stop watching. And that does, like Octavio said, like you turn it on and you can't really stop watching it. What do you guys think it is that draws people in?
I genuinely have no idea. I really don't. I don't know if it's that it's relatable because it's about real people doing real human things. But other than that, I really don't know. I would love, what is it? Can you tell us?
One thing I think that it can be is probably the psychology of a solution at the end. Like you start and then it's completed. So like, and you watch
They're
some
all
other.
bodies.
Yeah, right? So when you watch a show that's not a procedural, you got to stay with it and you hope you get to the end, you hope it pays off and you got to keep up. But with the procedural, it's like life is hard. This world is on fire, right? But you come home and you can turn on this procedural and you'll see there's a problem. And then by the end, there's a solution. And it's like that thing in your brain, like, oh, that feels good. And then another one and another one, when you can come in and out of it. I would assume that's maybe what it is. That's what I
see
like.
Everyone literally nodding their heads.
Great answer.
Yeah, it's a great answer.
Right, that's awesome.
I would ask the guys what they think, but good luck topping that.
Yeah, Daniel, what's your perspective?
For
on
sure. So to just kind of piggyback, I would say what she said.
I second that.
I do. I think that's a huge.
That's
a huge part of it. I think it's also there is a sort of a slice of life nature to what you're seeing. That is that relatability thing. Real people doing real work. People who are good at their jobs. There's also a satisfaction inherent in watching that process unfold as well. But I do think ultimately a big hook is that you got a problem and then you get a solution.
Yeah.
How often do you get that in life?
Yeah. I think sorry.
No, I was just going to say I agree with that. And I also think, like he said, about your magneticism and everything. I think it's the actors ultimately, because I attribute the success of SVU a lot to Mariska and Ice-T,
Yes.
you know, because
For sure.
I walk down the stage, you know, and people love them, you know, and so it's the people.
Yeah.
I think so too. Yeah, people love Jesse. They were like, Jesse, I have dreams about him. Like the comments.
You're like, I'm playing his sister.
Right? But I would also say, like my mom says, it's also like when you watch it, people like to participate. Like, I think I know who did it, or why they did it, or that part that you kind of don't get in some other type of shows. So it's the aspect of like, I knew it. I knew it was that person. Or you feel smarter sometimes when you leave a show, especially like a medical drama. You're like, I didn't know that streptococcus
Oh yeah, I think I can solve any medical problem. I'm like, oh, I know what it is now. I've watched med for years. I know exactly what it is. David, you said this in the beginning, but you obviously, your background of storytelling is a family drama, and I mean, Friday Night Lights, Parenthood. I mean, it doesn't get much better. It's very clear, I would say, on Most Wanted that the relationships have become such a big part of the show as well. And I would say in all of these shows, something that they walk the line with is not just a straight procedural, is you do end up falling in love with the people and the romances and the relationships that these people are forming. So how do you kind of go about walking that line and that balance between, we want a procedural, we want the case of the week, people figuring it out, but we also, let's be honest, we love a ship moment where we can fall for a couple.
That's a great question. It's hard. What we do, we're about to start writing the next season Monday. So the first thing we'll do is we'll get in the room on Monday with all the writers. We'll take each character one at a time. We'll say, all right, what do we want to do with Dylan McDermott this year? Does Dylan need a love interest? Does Dylan need a drinking problem? So we sort of, whatever it is.
Two options.
And we do that with each character and we arc it out. Last year was a bit of an anomaly. We only did 13 episodes because of the strike. But when you have 22 episodes and you take each character, we figure out what they want to do. And then what I've learned is basically you have to tell a character story in a procedural, at least in our show, in 3 beats. You get a beat at the beginning where you present the problem. You get a little middle beat where you pick it up, and then you get a beat at the end, which is the ending. So it's very hard to do, a layered, nuanced, emotional story in 3 beats. I'll never forget first year of Friday Night Lights, we were stuck, and Liz Heldon pitched, what if Connie gets a haircut? And that was her pitch. And I was like, okay. She's like, no, you don't understand what a big deal a haircut is, David. I was like, okay. So it's hard. And we try our best. And usually what happens is what I alluded to a minute ago. We cast somebody to come in as a love interest or an antagonist, and they just pop, and we love them. And we say, okay, we thought this was a 2-episode arc. We want this guy. The guy we hired this year to play Ray's father, an actor by the name of Steve Williams, the first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this guy is incredible. We need more story. So it's a fluid thing as well. Mm-hmm. You're constantly trying to find something that makes it interesting. But, like on Parenthood, Parenthood, like, God, I'm forgetting her name. This is so bad. Who was Adam's wife on Parenthood? Christina got cancer, and we got, breast cancer, and that was an entire season of story.
Right.
You can't do that on these kinds of shows, but we try, little goes a long way. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite examples of it was, God, I'm forgetting this. What was the show where they would end up on the roof talking at the end of the time? The guy from Star Trek. Come on, people. Somebody. Yeah. Remember the end of Boston Legal? They always ended up having a cocktail and a cigar on the roof at the end. I love that. I think that's a good way to do character on shows like this, because you can check in emotionally with everybody without having to have a story.
Right.
So.
Right.
Torrey, you know a thing or two about the relationship aspect of the show, because obviously your character was in one of the fan favorite relationships and got to kind of have a happy ending when both of you decided to leave the show. So for you, was it surprising to you how big the fan base became about that, when it became about the couple and the shipping?
That is when I do get, because I love a good relationship story, whether it be in a movie or a TV show. I think that locks people in so deeply. Sometimes you are rooting for these people. And I could totally get it, because I was rooting for Manstead to be together so badly. And when they didn't get that end game at first, I was upset. So I understood everybody else being upset. So no, I can totally see why that locks people in.
Definitely. Daniel, do you think, I mean, we got a little bit at the end, a hint of a new relationship, but only a very little taste for you. So do we think we're going to get more of that next season?
I definitely think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I really love the actor that is playing Ritter's love interest on the show, and I just think it's about damn time to like see a little bit more of what a romance like that in this setting, in this world, can look like. The challenges that would authentically come up. You know, the relationship between a firefighter and a cop. Like, we kind of discuss the kind of sibling rivalry nature of those two professions, and I think it could be really fun. And I think that we have great chemistry together, and so I'm very hopeful. I hear good things, so we'll just kind of see. Well, we'll just kind of see what happens from there. Yeah.
We really want to see Ritter in a good romance. I think people really want that. I do want to, I'm going to open up to fan questions shortly because I know you guys probably have a lot of questions. So I hope you guys are thinking about them. I'm curious about, for all of you, if there are other procedurals that you would want to pop into that are not your own. If there is any that you would really want to. Octavio, you go.
Well, it hasn't happened in the last couple seasons, but there used to be a lot of crossovers.
Yes.
Chicago Fire, and I did one with organized crime. I would love to be on Chicago Fire, Chicago Med. I think FBI Most Wanted had crossovers as well. So.
Yeah.
I'd love to pop in on any of them because I think that the guest stars and the recurring sometimes get the most fun jobs on procedurals.
I agree.
Yeah. They have the best roles. Like, they're dying and all the trauma is happening to them. So I'd pop in on any of them.
Yeah, right? Like, to be the murderer or the one who did it. Be like, I had to do it because my sister took everything from me. Put that on my reel, please.
Yeah, I would say I would love to be on, do one of the One Chicago crossovers again. It's been a little bit of time for that. I came on during a crossover, actually.
Right.
Which was great fun, and so huge and big. And, I'd love to be on like FBI Most Wanted, FBI Organized Crime. I'd like to be
sold.
Come on over.
I'd like to just pretty much everything. I think every show could benefit from a little Ritter.
That's right. We love that.
That's my official pitch. Thank you for giving me the platform for that.
Travina, which one do you want to pop in on?
Oh, goodness.
It doesn't have to be one of the ones on the
I know. I was thinking maybe a medical one. I shouldn't be I've auditioned for the FBIs and I'm just like, do you really want me holding a gun?
Yes, definitely. I would watch that.
It needs to be a comedy, but no. My dad's a cop, and he's always like, "That's not how,"
Yeah, of course.
He would judge me. So yeah, I think. Okay, one where I don't have to touch blood, and not hold a gun. I know. You know what? No, is 911 a procedural?
Yes.
Yes. Oh my God, y'all. Yes, 911.
That'd be fun.
I want a lion to be eating my face or something.
That would happen. So that
was so wild. I love it. All the scenarios they come up with, There are worms in my eyes. It's like, how did y'all pitch this? So that's what I would like. Yeah, something crazy.
That is so funny. Speaking of the crossover universe, David, has there ever been a point? I mean, I know it's with FBI Most Wanted, there hasn't been a big crossover event in a while. I know that since COVID, I feel like it's been harder to do those big crossovers. But has there been a point where you've seen an actor on a different show giving something different, like giving a little bit of a different performance as the same character and being like, oh, we can bring that over, if that makes sense.
Yes, we did. You're right. We didn't do one last year because it was a shortened season. But since I've been on the show, we've done 3, and one of them was we basically took on the Jeffrey Epstein case and did a big crossover with that. And it was interesting seeing the dailies for the first time with Dylan being his character in an environment with the other actors. But by the same token, watching dailies from actors from other shows doing our words, our scripts was interesting. So we actually, Nina, who's on our show, started on FBI, and now she's a regular. So yes, that does happen. The crossover happens. Crossovers are hard, by the way. They're really hard to write.
I wanted to ask you guys
and they're really hard to produce. But the audiences love them. Dick calls it crack for the audience. Yeah. So.
I can't imagine being a part of the scheduling for those. That would break me, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, it must be so much fun when you guys get to do it.
I have to say that's really interesting about the Chicago shows, and I don't know if you noticed this. Each show took on its own med fire PD. You go on to PD and it's super dark and everyone's and then you go on to fire and they're all playing pranks on each other all the time.
Yeah.
And it's almost a little intimidating because they're just rough housing all the time. You're like, oh my God. And then you go on med and everyone's like, hello, how are you doing today? They really did, right?
I have to say, working on fire, it is a circus. So fun, though.
Oh my gosh, that was so funny. Do you guys feel that try to think of the right way to say this. Do you guys feel like the relatability of your characters have impacted you personally at all?
Not sure I understand the question.
I know. I feel like I asked it weird, so that's on me. Well, I guess what from have your characters, the people that you play, because you play them for such a long time, and the hours on procedurals are very long. So I feel like that's something I also want to say is that has that seeped into you at all as a person?
I don't feel like there's a role I've done that hasn't seeped. That sounds so pretentious, but it's true. You really, for me personally, and everybody could be different, but for me personally, my acting's always 50-50. It's 50 the character, 50 me. If I can't bring a little bit of me into it, I normally don't do that great of a job. So you can't blend with somebody like that without taking part of it with you really forever, especially when you play someone for so long, if that makes sense.
Travina?
I bet. I mean, I think there's a lot of me and Kyri, and in a good way. I like to bring that, but there are other things that she's very different than me. So I guess I'll see if the Irrational continues on for season 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. What that is playing her
25.
for a long. Would you say 25? 25. Lord of mercy. But I think that, there's always a connection. Every character leaves something on you. I think it's also important for actors to be very, use some discernment when you pick characters, because if that's what you want to hold on to, you know what I mean? It could be dangerous.
So that's something I was going to say, is that some of the storylines for these can get pretty dark. A lot of them, I mean, I've cried watching every single one of these shows. So I would assume that for you, sometimes it might be a little difficult to shake that off. So what is that like? What is that process like for you guys when you have to get out of a heavier episode?
I mean, I find those moments to be super cathartic because it's free therapy, right? Mm-hmm. As long as you're able to put it away at the end of the day, just go into it, get all your dark demons out, leave it there. And then you get to go home and you're like, wow, I feel 100 pounds lighter.
Right.
I do think that is a skill set that you sort of develop as an actor almost on your own. The ability to kind of, again, put something away at the end of the day. It is something that you have to learn how to do, because I feel like there have been times where I've played someone and I have 100% taken that on, and shit just got weird. And then I was like, okay, well, buddy, we need to figure out a system for leaving things there and vice versa. But luckily for me, Ritter he's a voice of reason, which I'm not in my life. And so I will say there are elements of that role and his role in that world that that I'm glad to kind of engage with more in my own life, just because like structure and discipline and like all that stuff that is so a part of what drives that character are things that I've needed in my life. And so I think there are also these sort of beneficial symbiotic relationships that you kind of develop with your characters sometime. But that being said, boundaries are really, really important just to protect your essence.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm like you said, I'm blessed enough that my character and I share similar virtues. But I get to watch other actors that come in and play guest stars in SVU and go deep. And I get it. Guest stars have the best roles and everything. But sometimes I'm glad that I'm not playing those roles, because I see how they struggle getting out of character when they go there. But this is a particular situation.
Yeah. Or you have people who have been doing it for 25 years and the crew and everybody just like laughing it up. And you see the one guest star in the corner that's like, this is my big break. And they're just sobbing in the corner. You have to remind everybody, like, we have to be really respectful of this person. Yeah. They're getting into their thing right now.
Yeah, that's the hardest part.
I think it is important to have some sort of ritual or something because, your body doesn't know whether it's real or not. Like in our first season, we had a scene where it was about like a police shooting gone wrong when it was like a no-knock situation. It was very close to life. And I was pulled over by the police in the episode. And every time we did a take, my body was still going in the reaction. Like, this is a white cop pulling me over. And, I have to keep it like I know it's fake, but it's real enough so I can tell the story, in the moment. But afterwards, you have to do something to protect yourself because your body is going to still have the internal stress response. So whether it's, meditative music, a bath, a shower, or something to like, it's separate, it's different. So you don't carry that because it's like a show about sexual assault all the time. Like that's a lot. And so I think to even vicariously witness that, experience that, I hope that there's something that you do also for yourself.
Yeah, we tell a lot of jokes.
Okay. He was like, I'm not sharing what I do.
My process is my process, kids.
Thank you, Daddy.
All right, so I want to start opening it up to questions. So I know there's someone going to walk around with a mic. Well, if you want to come right over here, yeah.
Thanks. So it feels like procedurals are often like a staple of network TV. And I'm curious, do you have any thoughts or insights on why these shows really seem to gravitate more towards networks and say like streaming services?
It's a great question. David, maybe you want to tackle that one first?
Yeah, I mean, I was sitting here thinking, is there a procedural on a streamer? Does anybody know of one?
It's not like pulled from.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say Poker Faces, technically, because it's Case of the Week.
Okay, Case of the Week, yeah. I mean, I think part of the answer for the studio is they can lock everything into a box and say, this is what this show is. This is who the cast is. We know what this show is and what it'll be every week. Therefore, they're predictable from a production standpoint for the studio, I think. And so that makes them a good bet. Plus, people love them. That makes it another good bet. And so I think that's why they end up on, I mean, if you look, Tuesday night on CBS is all procedural. I'm sure there's other nights where it's pretty close.
Thursday on NBC.
Yeah. So but I do think a lot of it has to do with the controllability and predictability from a production standpoint, not a creative standpoint. But the network can say, all right, I know exactly what 22 episodes of FBI Most Wanted is going to cost. I know what we can get for our ad sales and revenue based on this show and this cast. They can do the math and it makes them comfortable.
That's a really good question. All right, next one.
Hi.
It's a question for David, and then I do have one kind of for the actors related. But to build on what you all were sharing around like why we like procedurals, I also think an element that's really exciting for me is like I really enjoy just seeing how these characters are going to be challenged or triggered by some of the cases that they encounter, and like TGIT, Shondaland, Scandal in particular, I think is something that makes me think of that, like how the cases reflect the character's internal journey. So I was going to ask in the writer's room, how do you decide like which case will challenge a character most, if you will? Like, what are those discussions like? Has it changed because of streaming? And then for the actors related, like, or when you've guest starred, like, how do you catch up, like, emotionally, knowing that you might have a limited runway or arc given that framework? So thank you.
I'll go first. That's a great question. I mean, the eternal challenge of the writer's room is how can we tell a story that hasn't been told already, right? So we rip from the headlines. Yes, that's something we do. Interestingly, to your prior question about boundaries and everything, I've found in doing this show, it's the opposite. I never turn off. Everything that happens, I'm constantly going, oh, that would be a good teaser. Oh, that would be an interesting villain. I was walking in this building an hour ago, and there was one of those party pics, like you take in a photo booth in the gutter. And I was like, what's that doing there? It's like, oh, what if she was kidnapped and she left that there as a clue, And so you're constantly doing look, somebody getting their face eaten off by a lion is going in an episode. So we're always looking for ideas. In terms of challenging characters, we do that on occasion. There's a character on my show called Hannah who is very closed up, bottled, and we want to give her a love interest. And so we set about to do that and say, what would that look like for Hannah? So we cast Michael Raymond James, who I love, who's crazy, and came in and just shook up her world. But a lot of it's not as much about specifically challenging a character. It's about what kind of story that can we do. I always wanted to do a death penalty episode. We did one this year, and it resonated really deeply with Dylan in particular, whose own mother was killed in front of him on the street when he was a child. And so I knew that, but it wasn't intentional to try and fuck him up. It was just like I knew that this would be a story that I assumed and hoped that it would be a story that he would gravitate to, and he's great in it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we're always constantly looking for ways to challenge ourselves and the show and the audience and do crazy shit, like a teaser where someone gets their face eaten off by a lion.
I think there was a second part for the actors. I just want to make sure that we got.
I did forget.
I think it was how you kind of get caught up how much, is that what it was, that you get caught up?
Emotionally caught up.
If you have like a limited arc, or if you're coming in for a short period of time on one of the shows.
Oh, and it's like a long show that's been running. Like, how do you? I feel like if it's overwhelming, I don't know about you guys, but I always just like made sure I knew everything my character needed to know in that episode, and if it didn't pertain to her or what she needed to know, I don't need to know it, because it's too much.
Definitely. But next question, stay over here.
Mine is more of a comment than a question. I'm in my 24th year as director of a rural family violence shelter and sexual assault crisis center. So I just want to say how much we appreciate when the writers and the actors get it right. And I'm on several listservs for the directors across the state. And so they light up when somebody has a really good episode and they're like, man, they got that exactly right. And we really hope that the world is watching and paying attention when you do get it right, because there are so many myths that we fight daily about family violence and sexual assault. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have another question? Right over here.
Hey, so I guess this is mostly a question for you, David. When you're developing a new procedural, something that I really love is just like how kind of big and swaggery or silly or whatever, every character is just so big and distinct. So when you're developing procedurals, are you just trying to prove to a network first that like we can have infinite number of episodes and cases and come up with those and show that you can come up with story ad infinitum? Or are you starting with first these are the characters, and just like how fun and engaging each of these characters are. What's the order of operations on that? And do you think of sitcoms where it's like an adventure? They also have these ensemble casts, and it's like the misadventure per week. Is that considered a procedural? Because I experience them in the same addictive way, but I've seen nobody here at ATX TV Fest kind of talk about them in that way.
Is there a procedural comedy? Basically, I think that's a good question. I don't know, but going back to the drama world in terms of developing procedural, for me, I feel like it's character first. I mean, hey, I've got an idea for a cop show. How many times do you think the network has heard that? But if it's, hey, I got an idea for a cop show, but guess what? The male lead, I don't know, pick your superpower. The male lead is invisible. The male lead is, can see. I can't even think of an example. This is probably why I'm not very good at pitching procedurals. but for me, it is.
But second season, you're the man.
It is. I think it's always character first. I mean, it was said earlier about Mariska. Just people love her, and that's the actor I get. It's not the character, but it's hard to think of. At least for me, it's hard to think of a new world that could potentially be a procedural. So it's instead for me, it's like, how can we put a twist on this? How it can be different? What's the modern day version of Rockford Files? What's that happens all the time. Hey, can you do Northern Exposure but make it Southern Exposure? I got that question, and I was like, I think I could actually. So it's taking an existing thing and adding your own element and giving it your own twist. If you have a cop show with two really smart characters, or three, if it's three-hand or two, whatever it is, and the characters pop off the page, that's what gets it into the next pile. People are I was told this recently, people are looking for the next Moonlighting. If anybody remembers that show, the banter between David and Maddie and all of that, we're looking for that special sauce that goes into it, or you just find a really good actor that you can build a show around.
Well, so it can go both ways. Like, it can be the special characters pop off the page and then get the show into development, and then the actors come later. It's not get it kind of sketched out and then get it to, greenlit, and then get the actors and then let them add their special sauce.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think if Tom Cruise walked in and said, hey, I'm interested in doing a procedural, there would be 9 million writers trying to come up with an idea for Tom Cruise. But I do think to me, at least, it's about the characters in the procedural world that make it different.
Absolutely. We probably have time for one more over here. We can go to the front.
So I think this is for Octavio, Danielle, and maybe a little bit Torrey, but I think for all three of your shows, the cities you're in are a character in and of themselves. It's like you're on the streets of New York, you're on the streets of Chicago. What is it like bringing the city into your work and then living there and being there, knowing people come and see those cities and see you're filming on the streets? What's the experience of that versus, I know with Torrey you're on a set, but it's still part of the essence of the shows.
Torrey got to stay warm most of the time. What? You got to stay warm most of the time.
Right.
More than he did.
More than I did.
We spend half the time in the stages, and then we go outside in the streets. And I think it's always a shock when you go out in the streets and you see so many people, because I feel like SVU is such a staple New York show, and there's times where I can't differentiate the background actors between the real people. It all blends together. It's crazy.
Daniel, did you want to?
Me now?
You know.
That's a very interesting question. I was born and raised in Chicago, and also have never left Chicago really. And so I have this opportunity to be a part of this show that films where I live and where my family is and all of that. I think, like anything, so much of what can kind of capture the character of a city are its denizens, right? And so that is about who's in the writer's room, and it's also about who is on your screen. sometimes a little nuanced thing that you might think is like a quirky attribute of one specific city can sometimes come from an actor who's a co-star or whatever who is actually kind of from there. There's a sort of fountain of information that gets tapped into the closer you are to the thing, the thing that you're trying to portray or the story that you're trying to tell. Not necessarily saying that that has to be your perspective, but there's a great deal of research that goes into ripping from the headlines, right? For instance, David was talking a little bit earlier about this sort of consultant role that happens a lot of the times on our shows where, Ours on Fire is a retired, Chicago firefighter like chief. And so you get his experience is something that then can be relayed to the writers, that can also be relayed to the actors about an order of operations, right? About how to fight a fire, but more specifically, the kinds of cases that come up in a place, in an urban setting like Chicago. And I think part of what lends itself to that authenticity is just the vast sort of variety and collections of experiences that you can get on a set. I hope that answers your question, but that's my kind of experience with what you're talking about, of what is Chicago as represented on screen.
Tori, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, we always used to joke that Chicago had its own number on the call sheet because it was definitely a character in the show. And we also used to joke that the Chicago shows kind of did become and are one of the other sports teams now in Chicago. It was kind of like that. And it's kind of cool representing a city like that, especially Chicago is such a cool city. So
it is. It's one of my favorite cities in the world.
You're not biased or anything.
Thank you guys all so much for being here. Thank you guys for coming.